I have the great inspector Justin Weber from Mountain to Valley. One of the things I love working with you is just the excellent job that you do, the availability that you give to the clients that you do the home inspections to.
I know we do have a good relationship, and I think that's number one, first and foremost, is the relationships that you have with people in any industry is second to none. There's nothing that can replace that, and I really appreciate the relationship that we have and the ability to sit here and share some about me. My father-in-law has been a building inspector for over 40 years, and he kept on telling me, why don't you come be a home inspector? Why don't you come be a home inspector? And I didn't really realize that I had deep down inside of me an entrepreneurial spirit. You get people that are desperate when they come in, they say, I haven't sold anything in 5 months. Well, what are you doing? I'm waiting for the phone to ring. Well, you're gonna wait another 5 months, right? I mean, you know how that works. I graduated from Shippensburg with my undergrad, and then I went to East Stroudsburg for grad school in special education. So I do have a lot of academia education, but the only thing that really prepared me for it was life.
Well, I'm excited here today. I have the great inspector Justin Weber from Mountain to Valley. Justin, we were at an event last week, and I asked you to do this, and your tone was very reluctant to do this. Like, I've seen you do these before, and there's no way. And a few drinks in, you're like, okay, no problem, I can do this. So, welcome, and really excited to have you. And we've been partnered up for a few years now, and one of the things I love working with you is just the excellent job that you do, the availability that you give to the clients that you do the home inspections to. And I'm excited to hear, the other side of you, the journey process, which is what our program's mostly about. So welcome on. And my first question is, what inspired you to start Mountain to Valley Home Inspections?
So that's a great question, Mike. Thank you so much for having me on. I know we do have a good relationship, and I think that's number one, first and foremost, is the relationships that you have with people in any industry is second to none. There's nothing that can replace that, and I really appreciate the relationship that we have and the ability to sit here and share some about me. Um, so my background is not necessarily in construction or anything like that. I started off, going to college, came out, wanted a job, nice comfortable job, and I worked for an insurance company prior to getting into this, handling property claims. And great job, corporate job, work from home, company car, all that nice, comfy stuff that I thought was a great thing. And I did work for a good company. However, my father-in-law has been a building inspector for over 40 years, and he kept on telling me, why don't you come be a home inspector? Why don't you come be a home inspector? And I didn't really realize that I had deep down inside of me an entrepreneurial spirit, and that was kind of holding me back. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, as they find their way later in life, kind of go through that process of comfortability versus excitement and opportunity. And we as humans get too comfortable in many aspects of our life, whether it's getting into a temperature controlled car to go to a temperature controlled building, to go to a temperature controlled gym, to come back to pick your kids up back in the town. So there's comfort everywhere we go, and I think that we've kind of lost sight of what it's like to be uncomfortable. And being an entrepreneur, and I'm sure you can attest to it, it can be pretty uncomfortable at times. Um, Especially when you're the one writing your paycheck.
No
You know,
question about that, Justin. And I had no idea that's actually how you got your start was with you said father or father-in-law?
my father-in-law, he was a building inspector for a while, and kind of with handling the insurance claims, I handled property claims, so commercial, residential, any type of insurance claims that have to do with property. And basically, we're rebuilding houses from the ground up, so it's very detail oriented, very compassionate with people. It's an emotional time, and believe it or not, as much as we lose sight of this just being a real estate transaction, it can be very emotional for people. Happy, excited, sad, nervous, all those kind of emotions come into play, and we need to be able to adapt to whatever that emotion is. And that's why I love, one of the reasons why I got into this is I kind of love what I do, from that aspect, just being around people. And it is, we're in sales, No matter which way you look at it, we're in sales. You're in sales. We're providing a service, but we're still in sales.
What's interesting about that is it doesn't matter the line of work, where all of us are in sales, whether you're selling yourself, you're selling a product, selling your future wife, whatever it happens to be, we're in sales. And what's interesting too, Justin, is what you said a little bit before that, uncomfortable. Most people are afraid to get out of that uncomfort zone. And that's really where the fun begins because that's what I want to talk to you about is that journey for yourself. And I've got to believe in the very beginning there was some uncomfortableness, some challenges that you had to overcome. Could you share maybe
Yeah,
or two
so
about
it's
that?
kind of funny, but not really. I had a plan on doing something on my own and didn't really. I don't really want to even call it a plan because there was nothing really kind of in there. It was an idea, I guess. And my wife, my youngest daughter was, I believe, 1 year old, and I had a 5 year old at home. And I'd come home and tell my wife that I'm just going to start my own company and quit my job. You can imagine how that conversation went. But it was at the point where, when I was working corporate America, when this idea first started, they had given us paternity leave, and which is surprising for a corporation to do that. So I had 2 weeks. So I called in and said I need to schedule this. My wife's having a baby, and this was a year prior to me starting. And they said, "What is your employee number?" And to me, that meant a lot more than to maybe some other people. And don't you want to know my name? Don't you want to know who I am? I'm just a number. And that's when it kind of the gear started turning for me to start my own company. And I haven't looked back. But yeah, there's some scary times. I mean, the first check you get is all yours. So that's a unique, minus Uncle Sam and whatever other, kind of things you guys have, your splits or whatever. But, that check was mine. And there's nothing that your work that you put into it can, replicate that. And it's a really good feeling. And that just gives you the drive and desire to that. And, not knowing where my income is coming from, pretty good, driver for success. But, um, that was kind of how I envisioned it going, was to be successful. And you learn a lot throughout the process. You set your goals, and good or bad. And I reached my 5 year goal in 2 years, and that's exciting and very scary at the same time. You might ask, how is it scary to be successful? Well, as you know, as you grow a business, there's different pieces and parts that have to kind of fall into place for you to have systems and operations and all that other kind of stuff in place, employees, contractors, whatever it may be. So when you're not prepared for that and it hits you, it's scary. It's very overwhelming. I'm answering the phones, I'm doing inspections, I'm scheduling. I don't have any help. I'm picking up radon, dropping radon, doing water, everything you name it. So working 7 days a week was not abnormal. But that give
Justin,
you,
I'm going to stop you right there because I think you hit on
yeah,
some few interesting components there that many people should listen to. You said some very wise things there. Number one, you said 5 year business plan, 5 year plan that you decreased to two. And what we share as a philosophy here is that most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year, underestimate what they can do in 5 years. And the fact that you were able to accomplish your 5 year goal in 2 years, what do you think was the one aspect of your plan that helped you accomplish that goal?
yeah. So I know we talk about this. The number one thing is, I guess we'll call them leads for lack of a better term. Where are you getting business from? Okay. Um, I was very active in the community, Rotary Club, networking events, you name it, I was there. I was out at, 3, 4 nights a week away from my family, doing the uncomfortable, hey, would you like to have coffee? Would you like to meet somewhere? Because in my opinion, I've never truly paid for a lead or anything else like that. It's all been organic growth. And it's all specifically, I attain that to relationship building and taking the time to do that. You get people that are desperate when they come in. They say, "I haven't sold anything in 5 months." Well, what are you doing? I'm waiting for the phone to ring. Well, you're gonna be waiting another 5 months, right? I mean, we know how that works. So I found that once I get in and started meeting people and letting them know what I do, and a key component to that is, how can I help you? how can I help them? You don't just go out and expect people to give you stuff. Oh, your child is doing a bake sale. Let me buy something from that bake sale. That's helping you and your family. How can, let's just say you're an electrician and I send you somebody that needs an electrician. So it's a two-way street. And that's
Justin, what I hear you saying is just come from a place of contribution. If you
yes,
contribute, it automatically comes back to you. You're contributing to the community, and because they see you doing that, there's a sense that they want to help you out too. And
correct.
so smart. And that's all we have to do on a daily basis to succeed, other than developing a system, which is what I hear you also say is your systems have developed over time. What was the early system that you had in place that really helped that growth?
So our
And by the way, I saw you smile, which is like it's funny to see. You must have
Well,
recalled something.
it's memories. So I think about the controlled chaos that we all have when we're first starting anything, whether it's learning how to read or learning how to ride a bike or whatever we learn in life. And there's trials and tribulations, and if anybody tells you something works right the first time, it's kind of like, yeah, you got really freaking lucky, man, especially with all that stuff. So in the beginning, I had no QuickBooks, no software, anything like that. I was just going to run a business. I didn't really know too much about it. I didn't have a scheduling software. I didn't have a report writing software that I was familiar with, and just kind of winged it, like we talked about. But then you realize that that doesn't work. I'm spending 7 hours on a Sunday balancing my books for a business that has like little to no revenue, and I realized that that was not time well spent. So the first thing I unloaded in my systems was getting rid of my bookkeeping. So I hired that out because that freed up my whole Sunday then to do. And as it becomes more complicated, it's very important to realize what your strengths and weaknesses are, and not waste time doing them where somebody else can do it more efficient. Yeah, there's a cost to that, but there's also value on my time, and that became very important. So now I have a software that pretty much is automated. I have an employee that's very dedicated and organized, and we have just everything kind of just runs now. But it wasn't always like that. We had some tough things, answering the phones and trying to schedule what's a vacation. Now I'm fortunate I can take a vacation, but there were times when I'm on vacation I worked the entire time. You can appreciate that. It doesn't end. We're
Absolutely.
not allowed to take vacations. Everybody else is, but not us.
So it's great to see your growth. And I once heard, I thought this was a great statement from somebody. It said, "New levels, new devils." And in the early part of a business, there's different challenges that you will always run across. You now have grown to a very successful company business. Now you have new devils, new challenges. So, how do you define success now, and where do you see yourself going?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I look at it as devils are like kind of ceilings. I guess you hit different ceiling levels as you grow in business, and for me, it's more of a revenue standpoint. Where you hit a certain level, then you're going to require, let's just say, human resources, or you're going to require in-house count. And I'm just going up the in-house counselor, whatever those levels are. So you kind of get stuck until you're ready to go past that next ceiling. And, I feel that from a revenue standpoint, I'm probably pretty close to having to make the jump to the next ceiling. And that may look like hiring a growth person, hiring another inspector, somebody to kind of answer do the office stuff. So that's kind of where the ceiling I'm at now, because I've been at the same revenue level for the last 2 years, which is a good level, but you're kind of at that ceiling where you're not going to go any further until you put these other things in place. And that takes us back to being uncomfortable again.
Well,
I'm comfortable now, but I'm going back. you know.
well, every year you have to look back, and the Justin of 40 needs to be different than the Justin, or should say the Justin of 41 has to be different than the Justin at 40. Every year when you look back, you have to grow, and it certainly sounds like you've grown. And boy, you have a terrific mindset too. So, let's talk about a little bit about home inspection. And so, how would you define home inspection? Like, what do you do?
So
I mean,
yeah,
it
so
sounds so simple, and then someone does it for the first time, and they're like, "Oh, now I understand." But I want to hear from the expert. What's your
Yeah.
definition of home inspection and what's your role in this process?
So I can tell you that I do not have X-ray vision or a crystal ball. That's the most challenging misconception that people have of what we do. You're going to see everything, you're going to do everything, you're going to predict when things are going to happen, they're going to predict, that our water heater, for example, is just going to last or not last or whatever. So those are expectations. In reality, what we do, and this is the book definition, it's a non-invasive visual inspection of the property and the condition it's in the day of the inspection. That's the textbook definition of what we do. So non-invasive, meaning we don't cut into walls, we don't move furniture, we don't dig up carpeting, we can't see behind paneling. Um, and visual, meaning that we use our eyes, and you have to laugh because, and I'll get into what we do, but there's the most powerful tool that I can carry is my brain, and that's already in my body. You can have all these gadgets and gadgets and look like home inspector gadget, and I just feel that there's a time and place for certain things, but in reality, you want to focus. Use your tools that you have, and use your brain, use your eyes, and have a system. And like we talked about systems before. Um, so basically, we come in, we're hired by a client who could be the buyer, it could be a seller of a property, it could be somebody that's, inherited an
Wait,
estate
you
or
said it could be hired by a seller, and most people don't
correct.
understand that they can hire you preemptively before they actively try to sell their house. Why does someone do that?
So it's a great idea. I do have several people that I work with that do offer that on every listing that they do. The reason being, it kind of puts you ahead of negotiations, and in this market, it's very competitive. So when you're dealing with multiple offers, and you might still have inspection contingencies, and then you can tie yourself up for another 2 to 3 months. If we come in and do an inspection, you're going to get the big ticket items. You're not going to worry about the nitpicky like peeling paint or a window that might be busted. You're looking at your furnace, your electrical, your foundation, your home, and we do a full inspection on that stuff. And then that kind of gives you an idea of saying, hey, our house, we wanted to list it at 300, but we have like, let's just say $10,000 in stuff that needs to be done. We're going to do 290, share the inspection report, and it's kind of as is. It eliminates negotiations. I know that's a perfect world scenario, but it's kind of the idea of it is to get ahead of stuff, and time is money.
And I want to
And
ask
that's
you
very
about that
important.
because, like you said, big ticket items. And one of the things that we've talked about because we live in a community that sometimes you're outside the city levels and you're in a rural area where you have septics. Um,
Yeah. Oh,
so could you share, the different types of septic inspections, what methods you find to be the best method, and just that can be a scary component for a lot of people because that's probably the most expensive area that
by
individuals
far.
consider.
Yeah, by far. First of all, yeah, so if everybody doesn't know what a septic system is, it's basically an on-lot sewage system that's on your property, and they can take many different forms. Typically in rural areas where there's no public sewer or access to public sewer. So, with that being said, there's no sewer authority to take on the expenses of monitoring and maintaining that. So that's on the homeowners, and that can be um, if it needs to be replaced, if it is not good, anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000. That would be a rough estimate depending on the situation. So it's very important to have somebody take a look at it. I have my training through PSMA, which is Pennsylvania Septic Management Association. It is the #1 trade association for septic training, septic installations, and standards throughout Pennsylvania. And so we handle things a little differently than you might see other inspectors do, or other professionals. So with that being said, there's no in Pennsylvania there's no direct law or standards of practice on how they need to be completed. So I just want to leave that out there. So you're not necessarily right, wrong, and indifferent. We're just explaining how we do them. Um, so there's several different methods. When we come to do a septic inspection, it's very important that the tank is not pumped out prior to us being there. The other thing that we do require is to have a septic pumper at the inspection for the time of the inspection. I'll explain a couple scenarios as to why that's important. Um, when a septic tank is being pumped out, there's several components to the system that are not visible, such as the underground drainage system. So when it's pumped out, you can see a lot of, let's just say the drain field is not working properly. You will see water gushing back into the tank from the drain field. That's an oversaturated drain field, which is not good. and meaning the septic system is not operating as intended. We cannot see that unless it's pumped. Um, Two indicators that are pretty good when we get there: the levels in the tank. Are they too high? That means that there's probably a drain field issue because the water's not draining properly. If it's too low, there's a good chance that there's a crack in the tank, and the water could be dripping, leaving the tank that way. So that's why it's so important that we do that. There's a couple techniques, such as the dye test that's used in our industry that's not really meant to do for inspections. That's more of, is it getting from point A to point B? It's called a tracer dye. So if you think about what tracers do, they follow you from point A to point B. So that's all that's telling you, is that liquid is going from point A to point B. It has nothing to do that if you flush it down the toilet and you don't see it coming out of the drain field, that it's acceptable. That's not what tracer dye is for. So it can give you a false sense of security when you're thinking that everything is good, just because a dye test was completed, but that's not really telling you any indication of the condition of the system. So it's really important that if you do hire an inspector, ask them, whatever technique they're using, to explain why or what. And I have no problem explaining why we do the things that we do. So with that being said, there's other components to the septic inspection, but those are basically, the two different ways of kind of looking at it. And if you're spending $300, let's just say, for me to do a septic inspection, and paying another guy $300 to flush some dye down the toilet, um, you know, where are you getting better value? And that's what it comes down to. Where are you getting better knowledge about what's going on? So it's important to, listen, every car drives when you get into it, right? Some have different features which you pay more for. So people kind of understand that concept and can say, okay, well, I don't have power windows, but my car's still going to run, right? I have somebody do an inspection, but somebody's actually looking at it versus somebody doing a different method. So that's kind of the way we do them as a company and
Question on
business.
this.
So
So it's funny
yeah,
that every now and then I'll get that person that says, "Oh, my septic is fine because every year I make sure I put Rid down the toilet," you know,
yeah.
which I laugh at, and they don't know any better. I just, what's your thought about Rid and what?
So yeast cakes, rid, anything that's going to help keep the biome available and active in there, because it is a living, your as gross as a septic tank is a living biome basically. So you have bacteria, organisms that are helping to erode the materials that are in there. Um, so those two things have not really been proven to be effective with anything. Your best way to do it is maintenance, and that is done by pumping the tank as prescribed, every 2 to 3 years. No baby wipes, no feminine products, only human waste and toilet paper should go into a septic system. No garbage disposal. Anything like that can really disrupt the biome. And if you want to have the convenience of a garbage disposal and risk losing your septic system, putting $40,000 into it, then have at it. I'm not willing to take that risk. I'll go to get a compost out in my backyard, versus doing that. So those are just some tips about septic maintenance and septic inspections.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And question for you is, I saw you graduated from Shippensburg University, and then you have boy, some letters after your name that tell you all sorts of certifications you have. I mean, it was like
Yeah.
ABC to Z. So, what are some of the certifications, and which one are you most proud about?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Mike. I graduated from Shippensburg with my undergrad, and then I went to East Stroudsburg for grad school in special education. So I do have a lot of academia education, but the only thing that really prepared me for was life. I don't feel that I can recall one thing, and it's kind of sad that I learned in college. Like I remember all my friends, all the experiences I had, but I can't specifically recall time in a classroom. So degrees are important. College is important, but it's not necessary. And I'm realizing that more life was, so college degrees are important, but for me, it's more professional. I have certifications. I'm a certified master inspector, which is the highest level of inspector that you can get through our association. It's PSMA certified. I have all my professional designations throughout, for everything that we do: radon, termite, um, septic inspections. I have some previous business designations, but I think that they kind of speak for themselves in, you know, efficiency and, reliability are kind of tied into those designations. Now, just because you have a designation does not make you an expert, or you passed the test basically.
Right.
I mean, that's the gist of it. I know it's more complicated than that, but you were able to pass the test and get through. Any MD, doctors, attorneys, Esquire, you guys have a million different things. You passed a class to get that designation. Now, passing that class is more important, the education that you got in that class. What types of things are you learning to get that designation? How are you going to, more importantly, how are you going to apply them?
Yeah.
Right. So if I have a designation and I don't apply it, then that designation means absolutely nothing.
Yeah, they
So
I have this one friend, he gave me a great quote. He said the act of intelligence is taking idea and actually implementing it.
yeah,
And we're taking skill or knowledge and then implementing it. So, I mean, that's what's exciting about you. And when I look at you and your growth, it's been fun to see your growth over the last few years and excited about your future. So, when you give advice to somebody about starting their own company, are there any habits or disciplines that you've created for yourself to ensure your success over the next few years?
yeah. So one thing that I do is, I think you and I briefly talked about this, is that, you're a business owner first and a technician second, meaning what you do is not going to happen unless you have a business. So unless my phone's ringing, I'm not a home inspector. I'm just I have a website and stuff. So having the business mindset is the most important thing, which, and if you're not familiar with it, go learn about it. I mean, the knowledge that's out there and availability for people to help you. I help other home inspectors in our area start a company. Think about that. I'm training my competition. However, there is enough business to go around if you're doing things the right way. At the end of the day, I am my only competition. And if you have that mindset to take on that, it doesn't matter. I don't know what other people are charging. I don't know what other people's schedule is. I have no control over that. So I'm not going to worry about it. I focus on me, what I have control over, my employees, my company, what we do. And if you focus on that and stay focused, um, there's nothing that can stop you. And, I feel that we get sucked into this pit too often of worrying about what other people are doing. You guys run into it too. How much commission are they charging? How are they doing this? What are they doing? Why are they doing it? It doesn't matter. None of that matters. All that matters is what you have control over, and that's yourself. And I think that number one thing, once I got away of worrying what other people are charging, what they're doing, I don't care. It's irrelevant to me. People say, "Oh, this guy's doing it." I don't care. It doesn't matter. It does not affect me at all. I affect myself. My mindset affects me, and I think that you need to really take a look back. And if you can't do that, then it's going to be a long road. You got to
Well,
get that out of the
you're
way first.
you're coming from an abundance mindset, which most people have a hard time uh, you know, finding. So there's always business that you name the business. There's always somebody out there that's going to need your help. And when you have that mindset, and we call it the red car theory, Justin. You ever heard the red car theory? How many
Yep.
how many red cars did you see yesterday? Right? Are you looking for it? So you buy a new car, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, there's so many red cars out there. Or that vehicle. So in starting your company and starting doing anything in your life, when you start looking for something, you find it. And what's exciting is it's just, I had no idea about all these attributes about yourself. So this has been a great conversation. So how do people reach out to you, Justin? Because I'm so grateful and thankful that you and I get a chance to talk and work together on a frequent basis. And I appreciate you and what you do.
Yeah, Mike. So my direct line is I can give you my cell phone number. It's 570-899-3255. That is if you have questions, or if you're an agent or a client, just give me a call. It doesn't matter if you're purchasing our services. We're here to help better the industry. And I'm a firm believer in paying it forward and doing things, good things, just being a good human. And so I do give that out freely. My website is mountaintovalleyhomeinspections.com. And either one of those you can schedule, you can contact us, you can see what we do. There's some good information on there. So those are two big things. And on social media, I'm not as broad as you with the YouTube stuff, but I'm on Facebook is where I do focus most of my energy for the business. So it's Mountain Valley Home Inspections on Facebook as well. But yeah, reach out. I'd love to chat and help out whoever we can.
Justin, what's awesome about you, and which is like a detriment to our industry, the real estate industry, you actually pick up your phone. You show up on
Yeah.
time. So you respond when there's a question or concern, and that does not go unnoticed by everybody in our industry. So thank you. Like, truly wishing you the very best with your growth and your company, and thank you for sharing a few moments with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Mike, and I look forward to our relationship and growing, together in your business as well. I love seeing people be successful. I don't care what you're doing. It's great to see that. So, yeah, we'll chat soon, and thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin.